Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka. We are now ready to begin today's event. So let me invite Anushka Vijay-Singha, Research Economist at the IPS, to kick off the discussion. Over to you, Anush.
Thank you, Bhutika. Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. And once again, welcome to the Institute of Policy Studies. As Bhutika said, my name is Anushka. I am a research economist here at the IPS and also editor of Talking Economics, our blog on contemporary economic issues, and also the editor of the print version of that comes out twice a year. Before I begin, may I invite our panelists this evening. We have Deshmani Kishore Gomez of Chevron Lubricants PLC. Mr. Gomez, if you can please come up. Prajeet Balasubramaniam of Blue Ocean Ventures. Rashtra Delapola of the National Youth Services Council, Ministry of Youth Affairs. And also we have a young entrepreneur among us, and I think that's a very special feature of this evening, where we're often exposed to many of these views, but not the views of young entrepreneurs, real views. And for that we have Gayan Panitharatna, who is a budding entrepreneur but has had to put his entrepreneurship ambitions on hold and join the private sector. Please. And last but not least, Dr. Nisha Arunatilaka, Research Fellow of the IPS. Once again, good evening everyone. This is the first time we're doing an event like this. It's also the first time that we are seeing many of you here. We have some familiar faces, but of course some new faces. So thank you very much for taking the time and welcome to IPS. IPS, in this current phase, we're keen to bring in new audiences and engage them on our research and our research insights, and of course our research personnel. We have a very eclectic group of you in the audience today. Many of you are from the private sector, but young representatives from the private sector, from banks, from private sector research organizations and stockbroking firms. We have members of the academia, from universities, and also members of public institutions. But I think one thing we have all in common is that we have a love for Sri Lanka and a love to make this country grow, and also find clever ways of doing it and getting there. Again, before I proceed, I want to quickly introduce a few people before we go on, and a few people in the audience. Firstly, I think a leading light in this whole arena of jobs, entrepreneurship, Mr. Patrick Amarasinghe sir, we're grateful for you for taking the time to be with us here. He has pioneered many initiatives in the private sector, but also now he is doing the same and really empowering you through his program, Young Entrepreneurs of Sri Lanka. I want to recognize some of our IPS senior research staff, Dr. Saman Kalegama, the Executive Director, Dr. Dushni Veerakon, the Deputy Director, Dr. Ganga Tilakaratna. Actually, Dushni works on macro and international economic issues. Dr. Ganga Tilakaratna on poverty and social protection. Dr. Parakram Samaratunga, he is probably on his way, he works, yes there he is, on agriculture. Dr. Malati Knight on governance, regulatory issues and political economy. And of course, Dr. Nisha Arunatilaka on education, health, and labor and employment issues. Why, I quickly want to introduce why we are interested in this issue of jobs and employment. And I think it's not a new area for Sri Lanka. Isha will tell you a little bit about how this has been a historic issue. Even in this post-crisis recovery phase in many countries around the world, it's not just about bank recapitalizations or stimulus or sovereign ratings anymore. A big challenge has also been on creating jobs, more and better jobs, and also issues of youth unemployment. And we've seen it manifest itself in violent uprisings in many countries around the world. Sri Lanka too faces similar dilemmas of youth unemployment, creating more good jobs. How do young people fit into this new post-war growth phase? But Sri Lanka also finds resonance with what we see in some other countries. For example, in the Arab world, studies have shown that there's a huge preference for jobs in the public sector. So issues not just common to not just particular to Sri Lanka. Even in the UK, skills mismatch of young students coming out of university versus what's required by the private sector. We think it's only our issue. It's not. Studies in the UK, particularly by IFC and even recruitment firms like Manpower, have shown that this is an issue in the UK. But today we're not here to talk about those other countries, we're here to talk about Sri Lanka. And later on we'll get into some innovative solutions, and I'm glad we have people like Rajit, because we might have resonance with the Arab countries on the problems, but they are also moving fast on solutions. Innovative financing options like Oasis 500, Seed Startup, Plug and Play in many countries in the Arab world. The format for today's discussion. There will be a brief panel discussion. The moderator will pose questions to the panelists. The panelists, we hope, will keep their responses short to enable maximum dialogue. And at any time, any of the panelists can feel free to interject with comments on the other panelists' opinions. Then we'll move on to some audience engagement. I ask all of you to please first introduce yourself and tell us who you are, where you're from. Please keep your questions and comments brief and to the point so that we can open it up to as many people as possible. And also indicate if you want a particular panelist to answer your question or whether you want to open it up to the panel. So firstly, let me go again and quickly introduce Kishu Gomez, Managing Director, Chevron Rubicons, Prajit Balasubramaniam, Founding Partner of Blue Ocean Ventures, Rashtra Delapola, International Affairs Coordinator of National Youth Services Council, Gayan Panditaratna, of course, our budding entrepreneur, currently working in a commercial bank, and Dr. Nisha Aruna Tilakar, Research Fellow and Head of the Human Resource Development Policy Unit. So Nisha, I'm going to start with you. Tell us why the jobs challenge is such an issue for Sri Lanka, and is it new?
Jobs challenge is not really a new issue for Sri Lanka. We see even in the early 1970s, we had two insurrections, partly due to issues in jobs. And even in 1970s, there was a famous report by Sears where he attributed unemployment to he had three theories. That's his mismatched job creation and queuing for good jobs. Now still that is an issue, although the nature of the problem has changed. Still we find the same issues when you look at jobs, creating jobs in Sri Lanka. For example, although unemployment now it is no longer a problem of numbers, because you see unemployment rates have come down over the last 2 years now. It is below 5%. So it's no longer a problem of numbers, but of quality. Quality, the informal sector has not really moved over the years, and now internationally it's recognized the share of employed in the population is an indicator of job creation in the country. And that has not really moved from 2000 to 2010, the latest data available, it has stayed around 46%. So that means although unemployment rate has come down, we have not been doing too well in terms of creating jobs. A lot of our workers are going abroad. And also we don't have the skilled workforce to bring in investments and also to create jobs within the country. So, should I go on?
I also want to find out from you, this issue of, because, and through that I will move to some of the other speakers. You talk about creation of jobs. What about you young people as job creators themselves? Sri Lanka seems to struggle with this dependency on, say, the public sector on finding jobs versus young people going out there and becoming entrepreneurs and creating jobs themselves. So
that's a major issue. Actually, if you look around the world, you see the US and the EU all looking at innovation and new ideas to create jobs, to improve productivity and be competitive in the world market. Now that is not happening in Sri Lanka. Partly that is the education system. It is not only the qualifications that you get, but what is taught and how it is taught, how people are taught to think and get ideas and implement those ideas. Of course, you need to have the environment so that you can invest in new businesses and create jobs. That has to be there also. But human resources and has a lot to do with that.
Okay. Kisha, I'm going to bring you in on this. Are you able to find the right kind of workers that you're looking for? Is the Sri Lankan system creating that? And if not, what can the private sector do? Because I think there are enough discussions about the skills mismatch. Give us an insight on some of the things that you're doing.
Well, Anushka, you got us loud and you're saying don't speak for too long. Just limited to a few words, a couple of facial expressions, and that's it, which is a very, very hard thing to do. If you may please allow me, let me put things into context. I personally believe that we as a country has only one resource that's available adequately to be able to drive the country's economic growth, and that's nothing but the workforce we have. 8.5 to 9 million people, right? And you all know that if a country's economy is to grow, you would have one or more things, right? People, technology, capital, and land. Okay. Look at the three things. You don't have anything in place in the right time, size, in the right quality to be able to drive the country's economy. So 8.5 to 9 million. Ravi is here. Ravi would know the exact figure, but this is okay for the discussion. I guess, Ravi, with your permission. And I believe that we not use that asset strategically, right? This lady spoke of unemployment, 5%. Great, because unemployment issue is a global phenomenon, right? In every single country, whether you have 50,000 per capita GDP or 2,000, you have unemployment. And no country has so far eliminated unemployment. But the issue we have in Sri Lanka is unemployment. I don't know whether as researchers, you have statistics, but I've got a figure of 14 to 15% unemployment. So this is just to put things into context. Coming to your question, it's a dilemma. The employees are saying they do not have the right talent. Employees are saying no, we don't have the right jobs. So who's right? Both or one party? Both may be right. It depends on what situation you're going through and what kind of environment you're talking about the whole issue. I, as an employer, I'm an employee as well. Both hands. I believe we don't have the right quality that is required for the business organizations to be able to achieve their objectives. Several reasons to it. One, in an employee, we want a few things, right? We want the employees to have the right knowledge. The knowledge that's available in Sri Lanka is not knowledge that can create commercial value. Right? So that's one issue in respect to knowledge. Otherwise, knowledge for knowledge, we have it, right? But knowledge that can be applied to create commercial value for the country, for business, forget it. It's not there yet. Then to go with the knowledge, the skills required and be lacking hugely. I can go into a lot of details. I can take 1 hour to talk about the skill, demand versus the supply here. So that is lacking as well. And even if we have those two things in place, there is another piece that is missing relative to the other countries. That's the will to perform. And you've got to have the right attitude, right belief, power to perform, to be able to achieve something at that level, right? And Sri Lankans basically set the expectations here and then try to perform against that. When the rest of the world, talking about the better countries, bigger countries, good countries, when they set the expectations here and try to tap into the Indian capacity. So, these are few issues that I experience on a daily basis. And these three things have to be corrected if we are to basically, create the right talent pool for the country to be able to use the talent pool to try and achieve the economic independence.
I just want to pick up on a point you made. Not knowledge for knowledge's sake. The kind of workers that I can produce are not particularly attractive to you as an employee in the private sector. Where do you think that role lies? Because there's a big debate now. How much can the university system or the school education system create a talent pool that's exactly suited to the kind of worker you want, versus providing some kind of a general competence level that enables you to take them on and train them? Where do you think that balance lies? Because Do you feel that even that general level of competency is not being built, or do you feel like the private sector sometimes makes, well, maybe you say no, but you feel that they make too much of a demand, expecting these exact skills that you need coming out of the education system?
I don't think employers are demanding the ideal skills, in the workforce. Employers are willing to get the right caliber in, train them, and give the right competence required before they start performing at the desired level. I can speak for other organizations as well with my interaction with other organizations. That's there. Employees are willing. The knowledge per se is an issue because we haven't understood the requirement of knowledge. What is that knowledge that is required by the employers or by the business community, right? There is a disconnect between what is offered by the education system here versus what is required by the country to generate the revenue.
Is the education system listening to you when you and other private sector tell them, listen, let's have a dialogue. These are the kind of skills we need. Do you think they're not listening enough? Do you think you are trying hard enough to push the envelope to try and get the kind of ideas that you want to, get the education system, whether it's universities or schools, listening?
Our education system per se is the government, right? So look at the people who are managing the education system. Do they understand the world? You give me the answer. I wouldn't share my answer. So they need to first understand the requirement, and sadly, the government doesn't understand the requirement, right? So therefore, they have no desire, no need to change, right? So in the education system in Sri Lanka, we have two areas, right? One is government sector, and then you also have the private sector. If we look at private sector, education system we have, it's falling into place, right? The students who are getting out of the private universities or whatever you want to call these institutions, they are of better caliber. The knowledge is more aligned to the demand, and things are happening, right? So if there's a shift from government to private sector, if the shift is big enough, if the trend is good, I guess 10 years down the road, we will have the talent that is required, right? But we can't wait for that shift to happen, right? And world is not waiting for us. The world is moving in a direction, and we have to follow. There is no question, right? So therefore, the government system has to basically study the requirement and then try and align the syllabuses.
Yeah, I just want to bring in Rashida here, not to put you on the spot to represent the whole government system or defend it or whatever. But I'm going to ask you, what is the NYSC do? What is the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Skills Development doing? Do you agree with the fact that the government doesn't understand the requirements? The government is not listening enough? Please, that's the over.
Yeah, okay, Anushka, I think you may be on the spot. So I partly agree with what you said and partly disagree. So I would say that government let's say from this so from a public sector training providers perspective, NYSC, even the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Skills Development, basically they are providing the skills education. The ministry had understood this, and we have been introduced reforms to the VT sector, the vocational training sector, recently. So what we had identified is the major issues in the VT sector, the vocational training sector, is quality, relevance, effectiveness, and the efficiency. So I think with introduction of these reforms, so it will take some time. So we can't change all the VT system overnight. It will take time. But as a public sector training provider, so we completely understood the situation and the context. So we are trying to bring all these reforms into the whole VT system. And as an institution, NYSC is now slightly introducing all these reforms, and we try to look at more on the quality, not the quantity. So that's what I can say.
I'll be meeting Gayan and Prajeet in a minute, but I want to go to Nisha. Nisha, you look like you had something to say about that. Is VT enough? What else do we need to focus on when we're talking about reform, changing this mindset from the planner's point of view, what the workforce needs? And Kishu said other countries are being more futuristic. Anything to say on that?
Yeah, I think not only the VT sector, but if you look at the whole tertiary education sector, they understand that change is needed. And they are trying to change, but the change is happening so slow. At the rate the world is changing, how the university system, the VT system reacting, it is too slow. I mean, they know what needs to be done, and they are, as mentioned, if they study it, they come up with plans, and by the time the world has changed. So it's again time to change. So we have to change the governance system so that we change this change. We are not reactive. We are not reactive enough.
Okay. That's a good point, is to sort of take the conversation in different directions. We've been talking about young people getting out of university or coming out of this education system and not being absorbed into the private sector, particularly because of this type of skill. I want to go to Gayan. He is someone on the other side of this youth employment challenge. He is an entrepreneur. He started often as an entrepreneur. I think you said you started off your business in Galle, but then had to put on his entrepreneurship ambitions on hold, and now you are in the private sector. And give us a bit of an insight onto, I think, a lot of things. Firstly, tell us briefly your story. Tell us how much support you got maybe from banks, private sector, from government institutions, because I think that will help us lead into the conversation with people like Prajeet.
Thank you, Anushka. First, it's a great privilege to be here, and I never expected to be here actually. I thought I'll be posted with questions and answers. So, anyway, starting off with, I studied in Galle, and I got involved in the Young Entrepreneurs program where Mr. Patrick Amasinghe was heading it, and it was great guidance in school. And as soon as I left, there were so many people, my friends, who really wanted to get into politics, and very arrogant politics. And I actually told them, nobody's going to give you to eat, give you bread and butter, unless you do something for your own. Because at least that training we got was from young entrepreneurs. Thank you very much. I need to promote that anyway. So not because of any requirements, but what I felt. So coming out of school, actually with my friend, I went to the agriculture department. We had this liking to do some product in food, related to food. So we got into this fruit drink bottling business, which was something really big, but wanted to start in slowly and become the big producers. And went to the agriculture department and got the instructions and looked a bit possible, and with my friends got into action, got everything. First time didn't work. It expired in 2 days. So I knew there's something wrong, but couldn't figure it out because we were not chemists. Nothing to do with food. My father is a lawyer, a professional, and he never believed in business, I must say, but he has been giving me a lot of support. Never believed in business, but all this time, I had this business running in one of my friend's places. I had to hide it from my father because once he posed me this question, which made me really get back to square one. He asked me, I actually gave him my samples of the water, and I told him to taste this and see. So I was really proud that I got this thing done, and still I had the problem. I managed to make it little bit consistent, be for 1 week, and before it expired. So he had it actually and told me it's nice, and the smile he gave me was really disappointing. He said, what can you do with this bottle? He just asked me that question. And at that point I couldn't argue with him because he was a lawyer anyway. I was like really down, but then I again started with it, and 3 times, 4 times I tried so many times, all using all my savings. I just went in, all my money was spent in that, and for 8 years I have been struggling to get this business right. So for 2 years I have been on hold for a while, because actually I from Galle to Colombo, being doing my studies in Colombo and getting into a professional body. He still wants me to become a lawyer, which I would even love to be, but he has this office in Galle where he has been practicing for 30 years, and he is asking me, I need someone to run this office and a lawyer, I said, good, you give me your office, I'll have a good cafeteria and a nice place where I can, build up a business. He actually doesn't speak me, maybe I don't know what his mind is working in his mind. Anyway, so looking at all this, what Mr. Kishore Gomez was talking, it was really, it made a lot of sense to me. And talking about government intervention, actually, one person from US who came here. Actually, his name was Mr. Arjuna. He spoke to me and he asked me, Gayan, what support did you get from the government? Government for me was something big, and to my business it was nowhere, because I went to the all government authorities and got the relevant stuff to do this fruit drink, and still I couldn't do a sustainable product where I can go and market it and say, look here, it's 100% natural. And you can keep it for maybe 6 months without refrigerating, because ideal product can be kept outside the fridge for 6 months, over 6 months if it's produced right. So none of the government organizations could help me with that. So I was really down, because my father was a lawyer, nobody to ask. Somehow I got these connections to go to Gannoro Research Center, and where actually Mr. Dr. Sarananda from there actually helped me a lot. He gave me an instructor, he told me everything. And actually before going there, sorry if I'm taking too long, but before going there, so I went to Industrial Development Board. I just want to mention the names because these are the places where I went wrong. I went to the Industrial Development Board. I told my requirement. I'm starting slow. Luckily, a lecturer from Central Bank, Mr. Karunagoda, I have to mention the name. Sorry if it's not ethical or anything, but these are the people who helped me. Mr. Karunagoda came up with a financial solution for me. He told me he'll provide at least his savings to help me out, because my plan looked lucrative at least. So when I went to IDB, they gave me a list of people who could produce the machinery I want, because I didn't want to make it manually, not 100% manual, because I was working for 5 days in Colombo. I wanted to go back for 2 days during the weekend, work the 2 days. It was hectic to get back to Colombo and do the rest of the 5 days. I was working myself and 2 other friends of mine. And finally, when I went to IDB, I got this list. I spoke to one person, I don't want to mention the name. He told me, okay, if you are talking about above 1.5 million on machinery, you better come to me. I actually wanted to tell him, if I had 1.5 million with me, why should I start with a business like that? Anyway, so these are the kind of suppliers.
Yeah. Just very quickly, so that we can move to Rajit also, because I want to ask him about this startup business. If you have to put it down to 2 key bottlenecks that you had, that you had when you started this, from now and to make it a success, what are those big 2? Was it family pressure? Was it access to financing? Was it support from government institutions that you didn't get? Was it, I'm sorry to ask, do you think you had a good product? Two critical issues, just put it down to 2.
I think the government intervention, finally I realized that would have been more in my all these 8 years.
Number 1.
Number 1.
2.
Number 2, actually parental pressure was there. I would say that, because I think most of the people are experiencing it right now as well.
Okay. Rajit, I'm going to move to you. You're someone who has worked with entrepreneurs. Work with young people who are taking that leap and want to start up. We have people in the audience here today who have benefited from this new venture engine program. I think it's several of them, including one called Takas. What do you see as the entrepreneurship potential here in Sri Lanka? And people like Ryan, what do you agree with these same conclusions, or are there others?
There are certain things that I do rather agree with. In terms of, he was saying, he went towards the first thing that was an obstruction to his business venture was the government. The question I want to ask you is, why do you go to the government? Wasn't there any other players? There are angels out there, there are venture capitals, there are private equity companies. Did you think of those? The private sector?
Well, in that case, the first place I had to go was, well, I'm not talking about capital actually, finance.
No, even, sorry to interrupt, but even to get help with various areas, whether it may be financing, whether it may be product development, whatever it may be, today there is a wealth of investors out there, not in Sri Lanka alone, but globally, who are willing to help entrepreneurs like yourself, who have innovative ideas out there. And so, didn't you know about this, or is it?
Well, I was fortunate enough to know about young entrepreneurs in school actually, because out of school, even I don't know what the situation now is, because my thinking was aligned to become someone who is a job provider. I didn't know how to do it. So the best place with my product to develop it, the best place was the agricultural department. The training, I never wanted them to train me, but I wanted them to tell me how to do it. So they gave me all the recipes and how to do it, and they wanted me to come in 2 weeks and tell me how it worked.
Yeah, President, if you want, I just want to firstly take it in broader context, not just the capital part of it. With your introductions now, the last couple of years that BOV has been around, entrepreneurship in general, and the entrepreneurship potential you see out there, the constraints for young entrepreneurs.
In the last 2 years, we started Blue Ocean Ventures in 2010. 2 years has been a struggle because the first question people come and ask me, entrepreneurs, come and ask me is, how do I trust you with my plan? You can take it and run away. And then it took me 2 years to convince them to say that we are in the business of not running your business, but helping you fund your business, take it to the next level and move on to the next business. So it took us a while, and what finally we did was create a program called the Venture Engine, which we launched in March, which is a platform to empower entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka. Right? So it was basically a business competition plan, called so, but the end result was every single company that was fundable but funded. And one of the companies is here. I think Nairobi is one of the guys who benefited from this program. Right? What we look in entrepreneurs basically is their willingness to take the risk. Today we have created ecosystem is in place where with Venture Engine and the Lankan Angel Network is being created right now. The Lankan Angel Network is going to be comprised of all angels, investors, VCs, angels, So it's going to be a community of investors where an entrepreneur would, if he wants to start up a business, has access to this network where they can go and put the plan in and get funded if the entrepreneur, what we look in an entrepreneur is first and foremost is the willingness to take risk along with us. The attitude, obviously, team player, motive, self-starter. So these are attributes, a little bit of financial know-how. And even if they don't know that and they're willing to learn, then we sit and mentor them. So it's not just an investor community, but a mentoring community as well.
I want to ask you, on Venture Engine, I know that BOV has been around for a couple of years, but Venture Engine was launched very recently. I'm curious to know, did you have to launch that to get people excited about this because not enough people were like-minded were coming to you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said, 2 years was a struggle because there was not much awareness created. I mean, there have been venture capitals around in Sri Lanka, but without commenting on what they did, obviously most of them failed for whatever reasons, right? To define venture capital, it's high risk capital, right? So I mean, basically, if you're going to go into a business, it's a portfolio game. If you're going to go and invest, you invest in a portfolio of companies. Obviously, all companies won't succeed, but that's where you're building the entrepreneurs. Because if Gayan comes to me for the first time, if he fails, I will look at him again with a different idea, because he's tried, maybe the fifth idea might succeed. And that's the idea of this game.
Outside organizations like BOB and the business plan competition, if you take the country as a whole, what comments you have on this ecosystem? Because not everyone would know about Blue Ocean Ventures. The same thing that happened to venture capital last time, well, one of the things was that it was mainly tech-driven companies, almost all of them located in Colombo. For people like Gayan, who may be in Goa or maybe even further away in more difficult districts, what do you see as this ecosystem? What needs to be done to fix this ecosystem?
So, I mean, we have been creating awareness, right? I mean, with the venture engine, we create awareness by saying we are not only IT focused, we look at all industries. So, if you take the finalists who got funded, the 9 companies that, 9 startups that got funded, you're looking at fashion design. There were 2 students from academic design that just graduated and came in ethical fashion, so they got funded. Right? There was a guy who's in the tourism industry who's doing a boutique hotel, he got funded. Startups. There were guys in the e-commerce sector, in the IT sector, in the education sector, so we went through a varied range of industries. Right? So that was basically to tell everyone that we are not only focused on IT, which generally VCs are. Right? In Sri Lanka, we are focused on all industries. As long as the entrepreneur, we basically invest in the entrepreneur. Right? So if the entrepreneur is willing to take the risk along with us and has that extra edge, that's it. That's exactly what we look for. And I just want to touch on a point which Kishore was talking about, the skills sector in this country. With these entrepreneurs that came, I was shocked to see that none of the guys from the local universities came forward. They did come forward, but some of them were not selected because they were not ready to become entrepreneurs. And again, it's the mindset. Yeah. Most of these guys from the local universities want to go get a government job or parental pressure. So for what various reasons, they do not want, they like to become an entrepreneur, they are not willing to take the risk. Whereas the guys who come from private institutions, out there, they are willing to take that risk. We are actually talking to one of the guys from Informatics who came to us and they are looking for funding. The idea is not that great, but the entrepreneur is super.
Have you made an active effort to go into these public universities, these state universities, and try and stimulate some kind of a change? Because we're seeing this happening, there are entrepreneurship clubs, business startup, incubation centers based within state universities. Do you think you push the envelope enough?
We are. Last year we worked with the MIT Molecular Industry Program, so I was involved in that. We are working with SLASCOM, ICTA, HSBC British Council, again, our university students apply there. So we are working with different set of people to promote. And in fact, the other day I had a long chat with the director from the engineering university, and he wanted me to come in and give a true explanation of how entrepreneurship works. So what I suggested to him is that I'll bring along a few angels along with me who will come in and say how they do their investments as well, just to motivate them. The issue here is not, I still don't think that these guys will be convinced until the lecturers at the university and the parents are convinced. So I think they need to be convinced first before these kids could be convinced. Because how much ever you convince them, you are an outsider. The parents need to be convinced first and the lecturers need to be convinced first, and then I'm sure the lecturers can convince the parents. So it's a matter of how the mindset of the lecturers and the parents matters in this case for public universities.
Right. I'm going to come to you, Nisha, very briefly, and I think Sujit hit on a very good point. It's not just going to be a reform of structural issues or the structures of these institutions, big spending, demands on increasing the kind of investment that goes into tertiary education. You see the current debate. It's also about mindset. So, where do you think Sri Lanka has the biggest need? Is it on increasing the spending on education, higher education, infrastructure, quality, or is that not enough? And how much of it is to do with attitudes? Not just the whether it be lecturers, whether it be students, stop aspiring to public sector jobs, creating that vicious cycle, it could be parents.
Yeah, I think what is important is not only what goes in, funds that go into the education system, but what you do with those funds. So what comes out of it, how the people are educated, what kind of skills are given to them, how they are taught to think and how they change with times. So all of that and the quality, of whatever the knowledge that they get, all of that is not dependent on the number of lecturers, number of teachers, number of percentage of GDP going into education. It's none of that. It is how you use it to produce that end product. That is what matters. So I mean, that is the area where, because we are very exam oriented, so even young people, they don't have time to engage in sports or anything, clubs or do anything else other than study, get through those exams or get to university. So I'm not surprised that they are not taught from a young age to get engaged with society and do other things other than study. So we have to change the system.
Thank you, Nisha. I think this is a good point as I need to open it up to the audience.